Have you ever wondered what makes popcorn pop? Popcorn has water in it, just a tiny bit, but just enough to make the kernel pop. Each kernel of popcorn contains a small drop of water stored inside a circle of soft starch. Popcorn needs between 13.5% and 14% moisture to pop. As the kernel heats up, the water begins to expand. Around 212 degrees Fahrenheit, the water turns into steam and changes the starch inside each kernel into a super hot gelatinous mass. The kernel continues to raise its temperature to about 347 degrees Fahrenheit. The pressure inside the grain will reach 135 pounds per square inch before finally bursting the hull open. A kernel will swell to 40 to 50 times its original size. As it explodes, steam inside the kernel is released. The soft starch inside the popcorn becomes inflated and spills out, cooling immediately and forming into the unusual shape we have come to recognize. In this experiment, we will demonstrate the scientific method. Students will develop a hypothesis and conduct an experiment to test it. Several variables will be considered.
Okay, well, these were baked in the oven, so they're probably not as hydrated, I would guess. I don't know how long these have been soaking, but I'm gonna guess, I bet these are gonna be huge because they've got a lot of water in them. Since
Really?
They've been
I would have to think that the regular ones are gonna
be the best?
Yeah.
All right, well, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, we will.
Now do this step 2 more times. Once in a bowl of water to hydrate your kernels, and another time to dehydrate the kernels on a baking sheet. Both of these will be done for about 1 hour. Now you'll be popping each set of popcorn kernels for 2 minutes. Some variables you might need to consider while doing this experiment. The efficiency of the popper. Depending on how old your popper is, it may not reach the same temperature that other poppers would. If you're using multiple poppers, they may be different brands and ages. The starting temperature of your popper also makes a difference. The first part of the experiment, you're starting with your popper cold. Each time you do the next step, you've already warmed up your popper a little bit, so that's going to have a higher temperature as you're working with your kernels. So keep that in mind. The timing of the popping. This needs to be consistent from variation to variation. Make sure it's only 2 minutes and start counting when the popper is plugged in or turned on. Of course, the hydration of the kernels is going to make a really big difference. The hydrated kernels may take on a lot more water and be very heavy and possibly take more than 2 minutes to pop. There may not be enough time for them to truly reach the desired temperature of the inside of the kernel for that steam to cause the kernel to explode. So keep those variables in mind as you're working on your experiment. Be sure to place the popped popcorn into 3 separate labeled bowls. Now it's time to count the number of unpopped popcorn kernels from each bowl. You can convert this into a percentage. Now line up 10 popped kernels from each batch. Measure the line in centimeters and divide by 10. This is the average size of each pop kernel. Now measure the amount of popcorn that was made in a liquid measuring cup to get a volume measurement. And finally, taste your popcorn. The popcorn that was soaked in water should have made the biggest kernels of popped popcorn as well as the largest amount of popcorn. This is because the soaking process added additional water to the kernel. The more water there is inside the kernel, the more steam that is created in cooking, making the kernels pop the largest. The taste of this popcorn, however, will likely be chewier and taste a little more bland than regular popcorn. The popcorn that was dehydrated in the oven lost most of the water that turns into steam during popping. The dried popcorn kernels should have made smaller kernels of popped popcorn and were more likely to be left unpopped. The dehydrated popcorn kernels should produce the smallest amount of popped popcorn, and it's likely to be a little flaky and maybe taste a little burnt.
Well, it looks like I was right. This, the hydrated, has the least unpopped kernels.
I'm thinking we do best of three.